Tonight, you will lock a door. You will pull a blanket over a mattress filled with springs or foam in a room with walls on four sides and a roof that has never once let in rain. You will close your eyes in total darkness, in total silence, and you will not think about it for 1 second because it is the most unremarkable thing you will do all day. Now picture this instead. No door, no walls, no roof in most cases. Just open ground, a small fire, and the absolute certainty that something out in the dark can smell you. For nearly the entire history of our species, that was the nightly reality. Not for a rough patch, not for a famine year, but for hundreds of thousands of years, on repeat, every single night. So the real question isn't where ancient humans slept. It's how they slept at all, and how they didn't simply get killed doing it. Let's start with the obvious problem. Sleep is, biologically speaking, a terrible idea. For 6 to 8 hours, a sleeping human is blind, deaf to most threats, immobile, and completely unable to defend itself. Every predator advantage a human has during the day, tools, fire, numbers, awareness, disappears the moment consciousness does. From a pure survival standpoint, sleep should have been selected out of existence a long time ago. It wasn't, which tells you evolution found ways to make it survivable. Those ways are the story. The first decision was location, and it was not casual. Archaeologist Lynn Wadley of the University of the Witwatersrand has spent decades excavating Sibudu Cave in South Africa, a rock shelter that was used by early Homo sapiens starting around 77,000 years ago. What her team found there wasn't just evidence that people slept in caves. It was evidence of how carefully they built the place they slept on. Layers of compacted grass, sedges, and rushes, stacked more than a dozen deep over tens of thousands of years, formed what researchers now call the oldest known bedding on Earth. And it wasn't simple grass thrown on a floor. The bottom layer at Sibudu was made specifically from Cryptocarya woodii, a plant whose leaves contain natural insecticidal compounds. People weren't just choosing somewhere soft to sleep. They were choosing somewhere soft that also killed the mosquitoes trying to bite them while they slept. Even older evidence comes from Border Cave, also in South Africa, where researchers have identified grass bedding dating back roughly 200,000 years, laid directly on top of ash. The ash wasn't an accident either. It's a known insect repellent, and the people sleeping there appear to have used it deliberately, the same way you might burn a citronella candle tonight without thinking twice about it. So before anything else, before fire, before guards, before any social arrangement, the first decision ancient humans made about sleep was engineering. Where you put your body at night was a design choice, not a default one. And the choice wasn't just about comfort. Wadley's team also found that some of the bedding layers at Sibudu had been deliberately burned and replaced over and over across thousands of years of occupation. That's not what you do with a campsite you've abandoned. That's what you do with a mattress you're maintaining. Burning old bedding clears out parasites, insects, and accumulated debris, and the fact that it happened repeatedly, layer after layer, suggests something closer to a maintained household than a one-time accident of geology. People weren't stumbling into a comfortable spot and leaving it as they found it. They were managing it, generation after generation, the same shelter reused and refreshed by people who, in most cases, never met each other. Not every group had a cave, though, and that's an important point worth pausing on. Caves and rock shelters are a fixed, finite resource. There are only so many of them, and they don't move when the herds you're following move. For a population on the move, especially during certain seasons, sleep had to happen out in the open, often with nothing but constructed shelters made from branches, hides, or woven plant material. Excavations at the open-air site of Ohalo II in Israel, dated to around 23,000 years ago, uncovered the remains of a brush hut with a floor layered in plant bedding, built on open ground near a lake rather than tucked into stone. That tells you the strategies weren't identical everywhere. Where there was a cave, people fortified it. Where there wasn't, they built one out of whatever the landscape offered. The constant wasn't the cave. The constant was the engineering mindset behind it. But location alone doesn't solve the real problem, which is time. A cave keeps out wind and rain. It does not keep out a hyena that has smelled food and decided to investigate. For that, you need something location can't provide. You need someone awake. This is where the structure of ancient sleep starts to look less like a single decision and more like a system. Anthropologists studying the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in Tanzania who still live a largely traditional lifestyle, ran sleep trackers on 33 individuals continuously for over 220 hours. What they found wasn't a single night watchman taking shifts out of duty. It was something stranger and, in hindsight, more elegant. Because people naturally have different chronotypes, early risers, night owls, light sleepers, heavy sleepers, the group was almost never asleep at the same time. Across those 220 hours of monitoring, there were only 18 minutes total when every single person was unconscious simultaneously. 18 minutes, out of more than 200 hours. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a coordinated guard rotation written on a chalkboard somewhere. It's something closer to a biological accident that became a survival mechanism. The natural variation in human sleep timing meant that, most of the time, somebody's eyes were open. The tribe didn't need to assign a sentinel. The sentinel already existed, built into the simple fact that not everyone gets tired at the same hour. There's a psychological layer to this too, one that's easy to miss if you only look at the archaeology. Sleeping in a group isn't just a numbers game where more bodies means more eyes. It also requires something much harder to leave evidence of in the dirt. Trust. To fall fully unconscious next to another person, you have to believe, on some level, that they will not hurt you and will warn you if something else does. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer bands have noted that sleeping arrangements often map almost exactly onto kinship and alliance structures. Who sleeps near whom is a quiet, nightly statement about who you trust enough to be helpless around. Strangers, by contrast, were rarely allowed to sleep inside the circle of a group they'd just met. That instinct didn't disappear when civilization arrived. It just got rerouted into locked doors and security deposits. Fire did the rest. Control of fire, dating back at least 1 million years in some early human lineages, changed the entire calculation of nighttime risk. Large predators are, broadly speaking, wary of flame and the smoke that comes with it. A fire kept burning through the night didn't just provide warmth in cold climates. It pushed the boundary of safety outward, creating a lit perimeter that most animals were reluctant to cross. Combine a fire with a group whose members were naturally staggered in when they slept, and you get something that functions almost like a modern security system, except it cost nothing and required no one to volunteer. There's good reason to think this mattered specifically because of who ancient humans were sleeping near. Fossil evidence from sites across Africa and Eurasia places early Homo sapiens, and at times Neanderthals, in landscapes that also held cave lions, hyenas, and leopards. Animals with both the size and the instinct to view a sleeping human as an opportunity rather than a threat. Hyena dens excavated by archaeologists have, in some cases, turned up human bones alongside the remains of other prey, a grim but useful data point confirming that the danger wasn't theoretical. Against that backdrop, a maintained fire wasn't a comfort. It was infrastructure, the nightly equivalent of locking every door and window in a house at once, except it had to be physically fed and watched to keep working. Now think about the structure of the sleep itself, not just who was awake to guard it. Historian Roger E. Kirch spent years combing through pre-industrial diaries, court records, and medical texts across Europe and found something almost nobody expected: that for most of recorded history before artificial lighting, people didn't sleep in one continuous block at all. They had what Kirch calls a first sleep and a second sleep, separated by an hour or more of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, used for everything from prayer to conversation to simply lying awake by the fire. Kirch's evidence comes from literate, settled societies, not directly from deep prehistory. There's no diary from 40,000 years ago to read, but the pattern lines up with something that makes basic evolutionary sense. A long night spent fully unconscious, with zero natural interruption, is exactly the kind of sleep you'd expect a species living without predators to evolve. Humans didn't have that luxury for most of their existence. A sleep architecture that naturally surfaces you to consciousness partway through the night, even briefly, is a sleep architecture that gives you one more chance to notice something is wrong before it's too late. We didn't lose this pattern because it stopped working. We lost it because the environment that made it necessary disappeared. Once you have a locked door, an alarm system, and a city block between you and the nearest large predator, a body clock tuned for midnight vigilance stops being an advantage and starts being insomnia. Put all of it together, and what looks on the surface like our ancestors just lying down on the ground each night was actually a layered defense system. Insect-repelling, deliberately constructed bedding chosen through trial and error over tens of thousands of years, a location selected for shelter and defensibility, a fire that pushed danger back past its light, and a group whose sleep timing, simply by chance, meant someone was almost always conscious enough to notice if something in the dark was getting closer. No locks, no walls in most cases, no alarm systems. And somehow, for hundreds of thousands of years, it worked well enough that we're here to ask the question at all.